One of the things with these new technologies, both with smart Bluetooth probes and with monitoring, is the opportunity to reduce the number of maintenance calls that you would do in a year. So instead of doing 2 per year, 1 in each shoulder season, just do 1. That's something that Jim has been an advocate for a while now, and I think the technology is finally here to achieve that goal. It can be a bit of a challenge based on preconceptions of what technicians may believe is what is right, what is supposed to happen as far as their roles and as far as how many times they should be going to the house and the type of data that they should be getting. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you were a tech, would you rather run maintenance calls or demand calls, and why?
If I'm a selling tech, I want every demand call. I want every call. I don't discriminate, because any call I could be in is an opportunity to generate revenue. If I got into this trade to have a fulfilling career, work a steady day, maintenance might be fun for me because it's very low stress. I get to do the same thing day in, day out. I don't have to talk to the homeowner a whole lot. And even if they do ask me a question, I'm going to defer it to someone else to answer. And then you have a mix of in between. For most, though, there's a fear of, am I going to have a full day of work if I'm no longer going to that traditional house twice a year? And that's where I would be concerned as a technician on the what if. Is if I stopped going twice a year and I just go once a year, how many more opportunities does that mean that I need to satisfy a full week of work? And when you look at years like this past year in a lot of markets, there were not a lot of full work weeks for a lot of technicians. A lot of folks were going home early or not having to work on a Friday, and not every company is generous enough to cover their pay for a 40-hour work week. So it's really going to come down to the culture of the business. And ultimately, it goes back to what type of tech. You got techs that like to fix things. You have technicians that just love to do maintenance, and that's all they ever want to do. And then you've got the folks that can do it all. They can install, they can troubleshoot, they can do maintenance visits. They're the everything technician, and they usually get the most hours of a week. So I'm torn on this topic, even though it's an easy one.
No, it's not an easy one because it takes all types. How about yourself, Ben? What would you say?
So I'd say, Brian, definitely some great points you brought up there, stuff that I didn't even think about. But I'd say my experience I would say the overwhelming majority of technicians that I've dealt with and spoke to and rode with, most technicians would rather do a demand call than a maintenance for one simple reason. It can be very hard to produce revenue on a maintenance call, especially if you've been to that customer's home 10, 15 times. Customer's already got every accessory under the sun. They've got a new system. It can be very hard to make revenue on those calls as a technician. So you're like most technicians, in my experience, they're looking for those demand calls because they know that something's broken. They know that before they get there, something's broken. They're going to go there. They're going to find the problem. They're going to sell or repair there. They're going to produce some revenue. And at the end of the day, that's better for them as a technician and the company.
Now, does technologies like Smart AC or other monitoring technologies change the game for maintenance calls versus demand calls? Is the script going to be flipped at some point? Because when you go there, it's not just a maintenance call anymore. It's a smart maintenance call. Does that change?
I mean, it definitely can change the expectation, because one of the things you have to be mindful of is we have to change the way the industry is working, the way the consumer expects services to be done. So part of deploying smart technology, any type of monitoring system, there's an element of education that needs to happen at all levels of saying, this is the future, this is why this is done. That's been a hill that I've decided to try to climb for the last 5 years of we're still not there. The industry as a whole needs to be better. I think OEMs need to support this type of model, because a lot of what we're talking about here is going to the home less times, seeing that equipment less times, and therefore equipment warranties could be at risk. What is the OEM really holds the biggest stick in this, because of the fact of how they warranty their equipment is based on what they would consider a meaningful maintenance visit in a given year. Now, have been working through the same business model for at least the last 20 plus 25 years of that we have to go out twice a year, spring and fall. And we can bless the system and say, oh, it works great. You're going to be good for the season, which is impossible, right? You can only do a point in time measurement to provide any insight to the customer. So the opportunity to create a better experience is definitely there, but it's going to take a ton of education. And I think the companies that are participating now know that, but it's still trying to steer a submarine of an industry that's looking at it from their mindset of, my whole business is based on 2 visits a year and maintenance technicians and repair technicians. Now you're telling me I have to change my business model just to do this. And those were some of the failed lessons that we've learned 5-6 years ago. We went in guns a-blazing at Sensi and said, look, you only have to go out once a year and your customers are going to love it. And it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't work for me. You know, we went in very bullish with, you're going to change your business model if you want to do this the right way. And we could all sit here and agree today that, yeah, you do have to change your business model. I think it's imperative that you do, but most won't do it, or else we'd already be there. So a ton of education has to happen. It has to happen at a retail level. It has to happen at a wholesale level and just tactical level every day with the technicians, coaching or educating the customer of why, Mrs. Jones, this repair wouldn't have been as bad if you would have had our monitoring system on it. Because repairs like this, I would typically be able to see months ahead of time, and it would have been an easy fix. That's an easier sell to, or easier point to get across when there's pain, because you're bringing pain relief or the hope of pain relief to say, would you like to avoid this happening in the future? Yes. Okay. Don't care how much it costs. It's just, can you do it now? Because I'm in the moment. But how do you do that at scale and to a large, massive market? That's the harder part, because there are variables that don't want to move the direction that most monitoring platforms want to move. And to Ben's earlier point about going less to the home, I'm all for it, because the profit story is hard to beat. If you do the math to go to the house less times, you'll actually be a more profitable company. But that thought of what if the work dries up is always the fear of any manager in a business. I lived that firsthand. When you start to get rid of backlog and you're within a couple of days worth of a backlog, then everyone gets a little scared of what if the phone stops ringing. So that the work's not done yet, but I think that's some perspective on how do we get it there.
And Ben, with your work with Smart AC, you haven't been with them for very long, but for the businesses that are successfully adopting the technology, are you seeing them have that mindset shift with maintenance versus demand calls? Is that happening?
Yes, absolutely. So we're seeing with some of our partners who are shifting to that smart maintenance. We have some partners that are actually getting rid of their standard maintenances altogether and only offering smart maintenance with monitoring, that are now, instead of going 2 or 3 or more times a year to the home, they're going once a year to do a visit and then visits as needed after that. So if we detect something wrong with the equipment, we will absolutely go out there and be out there to check on that equipment. But if it's not necessary, then they're only sticking to that one visit. We're seeing great success with that. Technicians have been very happy with that. To Brian's point as well, there can be a fear. Like, if we're not going out there twice a year, are we going to have enough calls to get us through the year? Are we going to have to go home early? And we can't really worry about that, because if you look at a handful of different HVAC companies, or just most HVAC companies in the industry as a whole, no one's making any money on maintenance. We can't go out there just to keep guys busy. We've got to look elsewhere to make revenue that actually matters, and we're making meaningful repairs and doing replacements. Can't just run maintenances to keep guys busy, because it doesn't help the business to grow and succeed and be successful.
Hey, Ben, you bring up a great point there. One of the difficult conversations I've had in the past with some owners is the fact that they may have to right-size their business to truly deploy a business model like this. And that's a little fearful, right? To say, hey, you need to cut 5 people because you don't need to run maintenance anymore. That's a hard thing for them to come to terms with, even though on paper, you can't deny that it makes total sense. One thing I do want to bring up for any monitoring platform whatsoever, if it's not properly commissioned or retro commissioned the proper way, you're just monitoring a poorly performing system. I think we could all agree that there's only one true way to do that, because learning the hard way 6 years ago, we'd put a bunch of sensors on equipment, and the first thing that's happening is it's alerting, and now customers think, well, it's running fine until you got here. So one of the things I think also has to happen with any monitoring solution is the advocacy or implementing the business model of truly commissioning equipment properly so that you can monitor that system the proper way because of the customer experience that's involved. The worst thing you could do is just put this on a system that's already performing poorly. And I've seen contractors do that, and it's for a bad reason. We do not want to be predatory in this business, but I think any contractor listening to this video needs to truly understand that commissioning or retro commissioning of HVAC equipment has to be part of the plan, or else don't do monitoring, in my opinion.